All right, so today I wanted to talk about some of the things that I've thought about or more or less have pondered over my journey into spirituality and my journey into what really eliminates anxiety and what anxiety truly is. I'm not the most learned individual. I don't think I've read many books. I'm definitely not a PhD student in anxiety or psychology, but I will say that I have adapted a lot of many different practices, and I want to share my thoughts today about how thinking is anxiety. And that's kind of a misleading title, but I think that there is something true within it that I'm going to talk about today. Okay, so within the I don't know how to explain it, but the pillars, maybe, the big points in thinking, I want to analyze three ways we think, in my opinion. There might be a little bit more, there might be stems that you can branch off of these, but the three main ways I think that we think as individuals, as people, is the first one is subconscious thought. So this is thought that we don't really notice as much. It's a thousand little equations that your brain is solving in the background. It's weighing different things. It's weighing yeses and nos. It's weighing what we like and dislike. It's weighing what we are attracted to and what we're not attracted to. It's doing all these little tiny things and almost at lightning speed to a degree. A lot of this happens when we are sleeping as well. I mean, it's constantly going. It's something that, is always in the background. Then you have focused intentional thought. That's number two, focused intentional thought. So focused intentional thought is what I would call our focus, right? We have a degree of focus, a certain amount of focus that we can put in towards anything, a book, a test, a work assignment, any sort of thing. And our thoughts are focus directed toward, our intentional thoughts is that focus directed towards what we're thinking about or what we want to think about. And then the third thing is what I would call spiritual contemplation and conversation. Now this is the opposite of what thought is used for in a very basic sense. It is thought looking at itself. It is contemplating over thoughts. It is contemplating over feelings. It is contemplating over experiences. It is not intentional thought. It is usually thought that is discovered through meditation, in my opinion, and spiritual practices, as well as conversation within those spiritual practices, our interaction with thinking. Now, I know that that's pretty broad and pretty heady, right? But we're going to get into the subconscious thought and the intentional thought, and I'm going to make my argument for anxiety. So, I think that intentional thought is anxiety. And I think that subconscious thought needs to be lived in 95% of the time. And intentional thought is used for only the purpose of whatever you are trying to focus on in your life. And your lack of focusing on that thing is what is causing you to focus on your thoughts instead. Let me explain. So, subconscious thought is still thinking. It's important to think about your day, the things you say, the ways in which you go about your life. But as a man, you need to be overall operating at a beautifully peaceful level to where you don't have to intentionally focus on your thoughts for you to be properly executing what needs to be, or properly executing how to think about something. You should already have an understanding as a man of who you are, it's a hard process, but I think men need to know this more than anybody, because they need to properly lead, and you can't properly lead if you don't even know what you're doing or who you are. But they need to be properly doing their tasks. Within that, I think as men, we have been given a unique ability to intentionally focus at a very deep level and not only control our thoughts and our emotions and our feelings, but also the way we respond to each and every situation. I think women have the same ability, but I think as men, we have a lot more power in that ability. So think about this. When you're reading a book, let's say you're doing something creative, let's say you're working out, your full attention and focus is directed towards that thing. Now, if you have anxiety, right, your full intention and focus is directed towards a million different things. One of those things is the fact that you are anxious. One of those things is the fact that you feel bad. One of those things is your own thoughts. Now, when you're engaged in one of those activities and you're anxious, though, it kind of takes away that thing. That's why you enjoy doing it. It kind of alleviates that anxiety, and subconscious thought comes in, and focus is able to be easily more you can delve into focusing into something like that much easier, because it grabs a hold of your attention a little bit stronger. There's probably an associated dopamine release with it. A lot of hormonal things allow you to step into that focus much easier. But at the same time, those things are also very enjoyable because your subconscious thought can finally operate. Finally, when you live in a state of anxiety and you're a very anxious human being, your life, your mind can't run on what it needs to run on. It can't be without nonsense being flooded in and out. It needs more capacity. Not saying that it needs more capacity inherently. Like, this is not some sort of like physiological, biological video. This is just my thoughts about it. But you don't allow it to properly think about the things in your life, and therefore you take away, right, its ability through focusing on the way it's operating or focusing on anything else in life. When you live inside here, right, with a full attentive focus, right, when it needs to be somewhere else, you have a clash and you have anxiety, because your focus is saying, I want to be over here, I want to be doing this thing, but you're not letting me because of insert anxiety, fear, any sort of thing that is kind of weighing on you. Now, I want to explain really quick that your subconscious thought, when it is freed up, basically, there is an associated decompression on the brain, and that is why we enjoy creative tasks. That is why we enjoy maybe drugs and alcohol. That is why we enjoy stepping outside of that pressure, right? Because when we do, it is so worth it. But at the same time, when we do step outside that pressure, it doesn't change anything, all right? So I can talk about that in more of a separate video. But subconscious thought needs to be something that is lived in primarily. So when it comes to figuring out how to properly live in subconscious thought, we must understand that our intentional thought, right, can be leveraged, right? So, like I said, when your focus needs to be somewhere else and you keep it inside you because of something, right, or because of whatever, and you have a clash, right, that is your body, your mind, your heart, your soul telling you that there is something we need to be dealing with. There is something we need to be understanding in this moment. Now, that could be something very simple, right? That could be you didn't get enough sleep, you haven't eaten, your electrolytes may be out of balance, something physical that needs to happen. And that's not always easy to understand, right? But it may be a lot harder of a reason, like, you have associated trauma that you need to deal with. You haven't been doing something with your life that you truly enjoy. You can't see the beauty in the relationship that you're in. The people around you are not people that you genuinely love. They're people that you're with because of dumb reasons, right? Those are much more deeper, harder questions to get at. And the reason why I brought up thought in understanding spiritual conversation and contemplation is because in those moments when we are dealing with anxiety, we must understand that we can use our anxiety to leverage it, right? And focus towards, a thing, an object, a place, activity, whatever. But it also, to really get rid of this anxiety, to really destroy this anxiety forever, we must understand where it's coming from inside of us. And that's where meditation comes into play. That's where prayer comes into play. That's where our spiritual life comes into play, because these questions are not questions that we can always make sense of in the real world, but we have to make sense of it in our mind. And so we can only really do that 100% when we are engaging in deep contemplative thought. And that looks like entering meditation, okay? And this can be, like I said, in many different ways you can enter meditation, but you need to have serious, deep thought about what is going on in your life. If you do that, right, you can understand how you operate. And if you can do that, you can keep yourself from falling into these anxious pitfalls. And you might notice that, hey, physically, we're not getting enough sleep. Physically, we're not doing this, we're not doing that, right? You might also understand a lot of the physical problems that are going on in your life as well. But the biggest thing is that if we want to understand truly where our anxiety is coming from, which is the only way that we can kill this, only way we can get rid of this anxiety is through killing its source. And that looks like understanding where it's coming from. And we can only do that in contemplation. We can't do that by thinking about it in our busy days, in our lives. We need to have a set time to sit down and understand what is going on. If we can do that, right, then we take our focus not into there's a problem, I need to solve it. We take our focus into what is the problem, right? And then we can analyze the problem, and then we take our focus into, okay, and how do I solve that? And you don't even need to think about that. Your brain, if it understands the problem, will already think of ways to solve it. You just need to properly listen and understand and see what works, right? That's trial and error. But that is what we need to first discover. When it comes to anxiety, the first lesson that we can really sort through each and every little problem, right? If we really want to understand our anxiety, the first thing we need to understand, the first lesson is what is going on. And if we can understand that, right, then we can move to how do we go about reconciling this or solving it. While that is a very important step, this is the framework. Thinking is anxiety. You should not be intentionally thinking about all these terrible, rough, hard things in your life. You, as an adult, as a human being, as a man, even as a woman, you have a beautiful ability to reason, but it is not used with focus. It is used with a lack of focus. It is used with a lack, maybe not a lack of focus, but a lack of worry. You need to set a time, enter a meditative state, and properly think about this. And another thing is, if you still feel like you're working through these things and you don't feel like they're alleviated, then consider that it could be a physical problem. Consider that this is something that you genuinely need to go to the doctor about. Consider that not necessarily that you need to take a medication for it, but that you do need to hash this out with other people. You need to understand what is going on, right? You need to go talk to somebody about it, somebody who can give real feedback. If that is the case, send them my way. I can probably respond to them in the comments. Like I said, I'm not a doctor, but at the same time, I've been dealing with a lot of different things and I've been figuring them out along the way. Thank you for watching till the end of the video. Comment any questions, concerns, advice, things that I did wrong, or things that you want to see next. And yeah, I'll see you guys when I make another video.